Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming, whether you are watching us on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Ganjing World. And of course, a special thanks, as always, to our dear friend Red Access for moderating the live chat and keeping the discussion flowing. I want to ask you today to buckle your seatbelts because tonight we are going deep into the realm of missile fantasies, strategic bluffing, and psychological warfare, PSYOPs. Our target today is Benjamin Netanyahu's recent claims that Iran is currently developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. So we will call them ICBMs from now on, intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, capable of striking not only Israel, but also the United States, and that Israel has somehow neutralized Iran's nuclear threat after a 12-day war, and that Americans better wake up. He said, you are not far away. New York, Washington, Miami are all under their atomic guns. We're going to take that part piece by piece, fact by fact, and show just how hollow and dangerous these claims are. And yes, we will deliver it with a little bit of sarcasm where merited, so you don't doze off halfway. And my advice to our friends in Iran, I always told them don't underestimate your enemy. And my advice again for the Israelis, for the Zionists, to not underestimate their enemy as well. Now, this episode is for educational purposes. I don't endorse violence against any state or non-state actor. And I'm not calling for violence against anyone in this show. This show is made to explain the bluff behind Benjamin Netanyahu's claim. But first things first, let's play the video of Benjamin Netanyahu, who he sat with none other than Ben Shapiro. Surprise, surprise. Every time Netanyahu is in trouble, he has his loyal prostitute ready to come to support him. Take a look.
And we achieved this neutralization of Iran, which could blackmail every American city. People probably don't believe it, right? They don't believe it. Oh, we're far away, right? No, you're not. Iran is developing now ballistic missiles that are intercontinental ballistic missiles for 8,000 kilometer range. What does that mean? They add another 3,000 kilometers, and they've got under their atomic guns, the New York City in target, Washington, Boston, Miami, Mar-a-Lago. Okay? So that is a very great danger. You don't want to be under the nuclear gun of these people who are not necessarily rational and who chant death to America. And we achieved this neutral.
I want to play this video one more time just for you, my friends, to listen word by word what he says here, because we will deconstruct every argument in this absurd statement from Benjamin Netanyahu. And as our moderator says, not the first time Netanyahu makes outlandish claims. How many times will the Western masses fall for it? To be honest with you, my friend, I don't think the majority of the Western masses are falling any longer to the absurdity of Benjamin Netanyahu. However, I want to ask the question mark, does public opinion in the West matter? Does the public opinion of the Americans matter to the policymakers? That's the real question mark. I don't think that the policymakers are listening to the masses. And this person here is basically talking to the American people, fear-mongering in order to manufacture consent among the Americans that why the US has to join Iran in the next upcoming war against Iran, and which I addressed in length on Syriana Analysis. So he's trying to create a shared cause between the US and Israel, right? But let's listen again to what he says.
And we achieved this neutralization of Iran, which could blackmail every American city. People probably don't believe it, right? I don't believe it. Oh, we're far away, right? No, you're not. Iran is developing now ballistic missiles that are intercontinental ballistic missiles for 8,000 kilometer range. What does that mean? They add another 3,000 kilometers, and they've got under their atomic guns, New York City in target, Washington, Boston, Miami, Mar-a-Lago. Okay? So that is a very great danger. You don't want to be under the nuclear gun of these people who are not necessarily rational and who chant death to America. And we achieved this neutralization of Iran.
So, my friends, let's start with the threat narrative. The threat narrative is they could blackmail every American city. How plausible is that? Let's start at the top. The claim that Iran, once armed with ICBMs, could blackmail every American city. Of course, it's a favorite scare line, right? Broad, vague, and emotionally loaded. But when you look at the logistics, the strategic incentives, and the technical details, hurdles, this argument collapses quickly. The question that we need to ask ourselves is, why would Iran blackmail US cities when US troops are already in their backyard, right? First, consider this. The United States maintains tens of thousands of soldiers and assets in the Middle East, deployed across bases in Iraq, Syria, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and other Gulf monarchies, and elsewhere. These troops and assets are much closer to Iran than American cities. If Iran wanted coercive leverage, threatening US regional bases would be a more immediate, credible move than threatening New York. Blackmail, my friends, implies credible threat plus leverage, right? To threaten New York meaningfully, you need to already have deployed systems that can hit New York. So the threat is no longer hypothetical, but rather real. But even then, the risk to you of retaliatory response is enormous. You are dipping your toes in mutually assured destruction territory, right? So the idea that Iran would idle until it acquires 8,000-kilometer ballistic missiles only to bluster about New York and Washington while leaving US troops in the region at your own mercy, to be honest, doesn't pass basic logic test. Let's talk about a little bit about strategic logic, retaliation, and escalation. And let's put it in strategic lens, let's say. If Iran were foolish enough to threaten US cities, or try to blackmail at least, the US would have overwhelming retaliation options. Missiles, submarines, air force, nuclear weapons. That risk is too high, right? Nations that take the nuclear route do so under tight deterrence logic, not theatrical blackmail. Moreover, in the extant balance of power, Iran's greatest utility in missile development is regional deterrence against Israel, against Saudi Arabia, against US bases, not some transoceanic threats to US cities. In other words, Iran's missile program is oriented regionally and not to fire against the United States 12,000 or 13,000 kilometers away. Now, what is the difference between potential and current capability, which Netanyahu do not want us to know? Even in intelligence assessments favorable to alarmists like Benjamin Netanyahu, the claim is rarely that Iran already has US striking ICBMs. Never happened. but that it might one day with foreign help, right? Let's repeat. In the American intelligence assessments, even favorable to the alarmists, neocons, and Zionists, the claim is rarely that Iran already has US striking ICBMs, but that it might one day with foreign help. That's a theoretical possibility, not proof. For now, the credible evidence is that Iran is expanding its medium and possibly intermediate range missile capabilities. We will get to the ranges shortly, so stay with us. So in summary, using a slippery phrase like blackmail every American city is theater, not serious strategy. And Netanyahu is trying to convert speculation into a menacing narrative, but it doesn't survive technical or strategic scrutiny, right? Now, let's move a little bit to the claim of Benjamin Netanyahu about the neutralization claims, right? He said, we neutralized Iran's nuclear threat after the 12-day war. Poof, pure puffery. Netanyahu claims that Israel, or as he used the term we, meaning the Israeli side, succeeded in neutralizing the Iranian nuclear threat and eliminated the risk posed by 20,000 ballistic missiles during a short 12-day conflict. So if I want to open my calculator and type 20,000 missiles and divide it into 12 days. So according to the logic of Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel destroyed 1,600 Iranian ballistic missiles per day during this war. Of course, that's a bold, dramatic claim, right? How does it stack up against open conflict intelligence, facts, and historical precedent? So what do we know so far? I'm adding banners as I am talking to you. What do we know from independent sources about damage in recent strikes? Let's not take Netanyahu's word. Let's see what neutral external observers and intelligence leaks say. The first one is coming from the US intelligence, which is not a neutral, but they don't have, let's say, the interest in lying in this case. A US intelligence report leaked via the Association Press and others suggested the strikes on Iran's nuclear sites set back the program by months, not obliterated it, but by months. So early reports say US strikes only set Iran's nuclear program back in months. A new US intelligence report suggests that Iran's nuclear program has been set back only a few months by US strikes, according to two people familiar with the early assessment who were not authorized to address the report publicly and spoke on condition of anonymity. This assessment contradicts Donald Trump's statements that Iran's nuclear program was completely and fully obliterated after the strikes. According to the people, the report issued by the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, this was back then after the war, found that although Iran's nuclear sites sustained significant damage, at least some of Iran's highly enriched uranium was moved prior to the strikes and survived, and Iran's centrifuges were largely left intact. Now, a Pentagon official, I'm just trying to give you now lots of evidence for the absurdity of these claims of Benjamin Netanyahu. A Pentagon official cautioned that it is too soon to judge whether the strikes truly eliminated all key nuclear capabilities. Severe damage. Pentagon officials say it is too soon to know if Iran's strikes were successful. Pete Hegseth insisted Sunday that U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities were not intended to bring about regime change in Tehran, but laid out no plans for avoiding a deeper escalation should the country retaliate, and said officials didn't yet know the full extent of the damage. The Pentagon chief and Joint Chiefs Chair General Dan Kane in a Sunday morning press conference said the 3 nuclear sites sustained severe damage, but that it was too soon to assess whether Iran still possessed nuclear capabilities. Welcome, Mr. Netanyahu. We have a fact check, and this is a piece analyzing the US claims. I'm going to show you this research. Iranian nuclear program damaged not obliterated by US attacks. This fact check research concluded that while damage was inflicted, the claim of complete obliteration is simply false. Many sensitive sites were not destroyed, and underground facilities remain a major challenge. So the bombing of 3 Iranian nuclear facilities on June the 21st by American B-2 aircraft damaged the sites and set back Iran's nuclear enrichment program, but didn't completely destroy the sites or Iran's nuclear capabilities, according to experts they spoke with and a classified US intelligence report. The key nuclear sites, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, were not obliterated, nor was damage done to all nuclear sites in Iran. And Iran's nuclear enrichment capability is still viable. A 5-page preliminary classified report from the Defense Intelligence Agency, the intelligence arm of the Pentagon, said the US bombing of Iran's 3 sites sealed off entrances of 2 facilities, but didn't destroy their underground buildings and set back Iran's nuclear program by just a few months. What else? The Israeli government itself, they claimed, I'm going to show you, the Israeli government itself claimed that 20,000 missiles were being built by Iran. This is a number, of course, so massive, my friends, like it raises lots of eyebrows, right, and credibility questions. So the bottom line is the neutralization narrative is much more optimistic, let's say, than what public intelligence suggests. And we will address why complete neutralization is almost impossible. Announcing you have eliminated the Iranian nuclear threat, you have destroyed all enrichment, centrifuge, cascades, underground facilities, research labs, procurement pipelines is, in short, in a short conflict, 12 days basically, is a staggering claim. But Iran disperses, hardens, buries, hides, and diversifies. Nuclear programs are notoriously resilient to strikes, my friends. Some facilities are deep underground. For example, Fordo, Natanz, and they have lots of underground holes, right? Bombing them with bunker busters is possible. But having perfect intelligence, precise targeting, and no surprises is nearly impossible. Even if you damage a facility, reconstruction is always possible. Scientists, spare parts, hidden stockpiles, secret R&D facilities, right? Intelligence leaks themselves suggest Iran moved some materials before strikes or had prepared defensive measures. The history of prior strikes, for example, Israel's campaigns in Iraq and other places like in Syria, shows that nuclear or strategic programs survive and adapt. Hence, the idea that after a 12-day war, the threat is neutralized for generations sounds like fantasy from press release. But this is all about a propaganda use of victory narratives, right? People ask, why do they do that? Why Netanyahu has done that? Because in war, beyond actual damage, narratives matter. If you can claim a victory and say, we hermetically removed the Iranian existential threat, you consolidate domestic support, silence your critics, and push allies like the United States into supporting further operations. So it's a propaganda, not a war, if you like. So when Netanyahu speaks of a historic victory and removing the threats in 12 days, treat that as a political theater, not reliable intelligence. Now, we will move to a very important part, and that is fear-mongering 101 by Netanyahu. And this is basically paranoia on steroids, right? Fear-mongering 101, paranoia on steroids. We have to zoom into the third claim, the one designated to terrify and fear-monger the American public. Netanyahu says, you are not far away. New York City, Washington, Boston, Miami, under the nuclear gun of Iran. Well, this is, my friends, a classic fear propaganda. Fear-mongering, it's a fear propaganda. You paint your adversary as omnipotent, crazy, encroaching, imminent, and you as the hero or savior. And in this case, the savior is Israel. He wants to describe Israel as the only shield. But again, we need to beat it back with cold facts. So what do we know so far about the missile ranges that we could observe? The missile ranges of Iran. Iran's arsenal includes short-range ballistic missiles, medium-range ballistic missiles, and missiles capable of reaching Israel, the Persian Gulf countries, and Turkey. For example, I want to say, let me check. Yeah. The Shihab, for example, the Shihab tree family, this ranges of between 1,000 to 2,000 kilometers, right? And this is Shihab tree. I will show you a video of Shihab tree just for us to understand what are we talking about. So this is Shihab tree. The IRGC released footage showing the launch of Imad and Shihab tree medium-range ballistic missiles during the 40th wave of Operation True Promise Tree. And Shihab tree ranges between 1,000 to 2,000 kilometers. We also know the family of Radar 110. Radar 110 is estimated, or the estimated range of the Radar 110 between 1,800 and 2,000 kilometers. So similar to Shihab 3 family. Now, Iran recently revealed or unveiled the Khaybar, or as in Iran they call Khorramshahr 4. And they claim that Khorramshahr 4's range is 2,000 kilometers and possibly 4,000 kilometers in some claims, but this is all speculative. Nobody knows about this. So the maximum that Iran allegedly has is a 4,000 maximum.
First exo-atmospheric maneuverable re-entry vehicle, capable of changing its course in the vacuum of space. For this purpose, the re-entry vehicle is equipped with a liquid propellant thruster system for attitude control, enabling it to perform continuous and pseudo-random trajectory changes. This forces the ballistic missile defense interceptor and its kill vehicle to deplete their fuel reserves, which were designed for targets that cannot significantly alter their trajectory outside of the atmosphere. Once the exo-atmospheric MARV completes its evasive maneuvers, it is put on a precise ballistic trajectory to hit its intended target unguided. The thruster attitude control system puts the re-entry vehicle into a steep dive angle, and it's put into a spin, traveling the atmospheric re-entry phase unguided, but at a very high velocity. Its impact velocity of over Mach 8 means that most endo-atmospheric ballistic missile interceptors with hit-to-kill warheads lack the necessary reaction time to compensate for motion fluctuations encountered during re-entry. Thus, it can defeat such systems by operating at a velocity too high for their designed engagement regime. The steep re-entry angle, high speed, and resulting low travel time through the atmosphere ensure that the Khorramshahr 4 retains point strike capability, even with an unguided re-entry vehicle. The circular error probable, CEP, of this missile is estimated at 30 meters, while the warhead weighs 1.5 tons, giving it a high destructive capability against hardpoint objects. It also has the option for late submunition release inside the atmosphere to reduce dispersion, suitable for larger soft targets.
So, this weapon, the Khorramshahr, is allegedly or officially 2,000 kilometer range and allegedly could reach to 4,000 kilometers. But an Iranian commander recently said that Iran currently keeps a self-imposed range of 2,000 kilometers, just enough to guard Iran's interests in neighboring regions. Take it with a grain of salt. I don't know. 4,000 kilometers is between probably Iran and west of Turkey, or probably Hungary maximum. That's what at the current moment they acquire. So the evidence supports Iran's current long-range strike envelope is somewhere in 2,000 kilometers, what we have seen so far, meaning US cities are 10,000, 11,000 kilometers away from Iran's missile range, right? So there is this, the ICBM leap from solid war to rigorous testing, right? To hit New York, Miami, or Washington demands a multi-thousand kilometer capability, an intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM. That requires mastering multi-stage rockets, advanced propulsion, often solid fuel, high thrust to weight, re-entry warhead heat shielding, guidance over intercontinental distances, mid-course correction, staging reliability, etc. That's a very tall order. Open source assessments note the following. And the first one comes from the Arms Control Association. The article is Myths and Realities, Iranian ICBMs. There is no credible evidence that Iran has flight tested or deployed any ICBM to this date. there is no serious evidence to back up all the claims that have been made about Iran developing long-range rockets to deliver nuclear warheads. The US intelligence community assessed that Iran may be technically capable of developing an ICBM with sufficient foreign assistance, so not by themselves. Not that they are doing so. They're not doing that. Iran has never tested any long-range rockets. Iran's longest-range missiles are medium-range ballistic missiles, not the intercontinental range missiles, as critics will have us to believe. Okay. In the Arms Control Association's analysis, therefore, neither the US nor Israel cite evidence that Iran is actively developing or building ICBMs. Now, the Nuclear Threat Initiative, this is another initiative or an association. NTI says, no, Iran is not pursuing an ICBM yet. The Nuclear Threat Initiative states that Iran's testing behavior since the JCPOA shifted towards solid fuel short-range missiles, not towards ICBMs. So this is what they say. Since negotiations and implementation of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, Iran has altered its missile testing patterns, decreasing overall numbers of tests and focusing on solid fuel short-range missile capabilities rather than an ICBM. Okay. More recent academic and technical analysis flags that Iran has yet to master critical technology for ICBM and multi-stage rockets, re-entry vehicles, etc. So, and this is coming by the National Security Journal. I'm just referring to the sources now for you if you want after the stream to go and read yourself. So this is the source. Could Iran build an ICBM? It's on the National Security Journal. And they say that Iran has yet to master critical technology for ICBMs, and they don't have the technology needed. So they need, in this case, foreign support, right? Now, let's address something also absurd in the claims of Benjamin Netanyahu, the exaggeration, right? The exaggeration multiplier from 8,000 kilometers to 11,000 kilometers, as if 3,000 kilometers is a joke, you know, like from here to here. No, 3,000 kilometers is the size of a continent. Netanyahu's narrative sometimes includes add another 3,000 kilometers close, for example, pushing from 8,000 to 11,000 kilometers each. This is, my friends, even more absurd. If Iran were aiming for 11,000 kilometer range ICBMs, that would place it among the most elite and technologically advanced programs in the world. It would put it in the same level of the US, Russia, China, maybe North Korea. The engineering, testing, R&D costs, and industrial base required are immense. To claim that Iran has both the motivation and capacity to leap into the top-tier ICBM club while simultaneously its regional missiles fleet or regional missile fleets are still maturing, if you will use our logic, it's incoherent. So, but let's suppose Iran is developing ICBMs, right? What about interception, deterrence, and the US shield over its cities? So even if hypothetically, Iran managed to develop an 8,000 kilometer ICBM, the US has multiple layers of strategic deterrence. Missile defense systems, nuclear deterrent, intelligence, early warning, satellite surveillance, preemptive options. So the idea that US cities would be sitting ducks is theatrically absurd and overdone. The very moment you threaten a US city, you invite massive retaliation. Iran would need near perfect first strike capability, perfect surprise, and perfect defense to carry out such an attack. And of course, madness, right? Which is a fantasy. So this is all, my friends, a classical psyop by Netanyahu. Netanyahu's psyop is he's trying to push a script for dragging the US into war with Iran, right? We must ask this question. Why Netanyahu is making these claims? Beyond domestic politics in Israel, there is clearly an effort to scare Americans to brand Iran as an imminent threat to American cities, and thereby push the US deeper into the confrontation with Iran. This is pure psychological warfare, a propaganda campaign aimed at American hearts and minds, my friends. So if you're an American, I truly hope that this would be beneficial for you. So this is a war by proxy narrative. If you don't come in, you're under their gun, right? By telling Americans you don't want to be under the nuclear gun of these people, Netanyahu is simply saying either align with us or you become Tehran's victim. It's a framing designed to override American war wariness, budget concerns, public scrutiny. Notice the rhetorical structure. 1, here is the existential threat, meaning Iran with ICBMs. 2, you, American public, are vulnerable. 3, we, Israel and US alliance, are the shield. And 4, if you abandon us, this is your fate. This is simply what Netanyahu is doing. I would like to repeat this. What he's doing, basically 4 steps of deception and psyoping. 1, he's showing you and telling you, here is the existential threat, Iran's ICBMs. 2, you, the American public, are vulnerable to these ICBMs. 3, we, Israel, and our alliance with the US are the shield. And 4, if you abandon us, if you abandon Israel, this is your fate. This is simply what Netanyahu is doing. This kind of messaging is, of course, classic for pushing allied publics into supporting escalations and deeper military involvement, which, in my opinion, only makes me believe that the war, second phase of war against Iran, is in the cooking. Netanyahu adds and says, these people who are not necessarily rational and who chant death to America, right? That's also deliberate. That's another layer, painting Iran as irrational, unpredictable, extremist, right? It's not just a military threat, it's a rogue country, margin of insanity threat, right? That helps justify preemptive or escalatory actions in the near future, probably this month. You see how all this works, right? Combine a tech scare, ICBMs, moral scare, irrational enemies, plus protective cloak, we are your shield. That's how psyops are constructed. It's very simple. The trick is to tie American self-interest to Israel's war aims. So Americans and the burden of Israel's wars This is where you can push back hard. Yes, Americans have already paid dearly in treasure, in lives, in economic burdens for being dragged into wars justified by various fear campaigns. Iraq WMD, Syria's chemical weapons, Afghanistan, Libyan leader is crazy, etc. Many of those justifications were later debunked. Now, Netanyahu is reusing the same playbook. Escalate the fear, point to you will be next, demand America engage. Meanwhile, back home, the US debt is massive, social programs falter, infrastructure crumbles, costs of living rise. Is this really the time for another major war theater? I mean, if you ask me, Americans look to me exhausted. They don't need another war blown up in their name via manipulated fears, right? So if we put all this together, my friends, this is Netanyahu's missile theater, a cohesive debunk. This is a cohesive strategy to scaremonger the American public. I'm going to, okay, let's see. Why I'm bringing this to your attention, because I believe that Israel wants this war so desperately with Iran. It's in the doctrine of Israel, the Menachem Begin's doctrine, that they cannot allow any player in the region to challenge the Israeli dominance and Israeli hegemony. And these far-right Zionists, Netanyahu and his ilk, are so supremacists that they would never accept that a power in the region, a regional power, would be challenging them, is independent, and can take their own decisions without foreign assistance, and, if necessary, can defend themselves. Even the knowledge that there is a country in the region which can acquire the technological and nuclear knowledge is forbidden. This is not defending Iran. This is not defending the Islamic regime in Iran. I'm talking to you simple facts about the mindset which drives these wars in the region for over 20, 30 years. This mindset that we will knock out any competitor in the region, and we will not allow the rise of any regional power, even if this rise is economic, like they did with Syria, right? Syria between 2005 and 2010 was self-sufficient in everything. It had over 4% GDP. The GDP was increasing 4%. It had 7 million tourists visiting the country. It had a national production base. It was a competitor. And once you start, like imagine, the Syrian lira was, every dollar used to be 48 to 50 Syrian lira, right? The lira was strong. Syria had no foreign debt. So it was important to destroy the independent rise of this country and not allow it to have its national economy. And now, after the regime change, they will come and claim that Syria is rising, Syria has risen, and it's a phoenix which has risen from the ashes, and all this BS, trying to sell the illusion to the people that the foreign investors who will come and suck the country dry, and they will generate billions of dollars of profits for themselves, meanwhile giving the breadcrumbs to the people in salaries that they look, there is economic development in this country, right? Unfortunately, as long as you don't have a national economy, you don't own your economy, right? So Syria is now part of the global financial system, and the central bank has become part of the crazies. I don't know, the Rothschilds, I don't know who is going to own that, but Syrians will own nothing and they will be happy. They will go to the streets and celebrate their freedom. Unfortunately, it's very easy to psyop people. It's very easy. So this is all also coming at times when the public opinion in the US is shifting drastically against Israel. So this is the last chance of Benjamin Netanyahu to sell this war. If he fails in selling this war now to the American public, in a matter of few months, probably a year, it will be too late already. The number of Americans who object the Israeli onslaught against the Palestinians has increased 60%, or the number is 60%, and many people say Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. I will give you a few examples for you to know where things are headed in the US, just quickly, without diverting our attention so much. But this is very important. Like people like, for example, are digging into the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And Candace Owens shared a screenshot of a group chat where Charlie Kirk explicitly said he was, quote, leaving the pro-Israel cause just 48 hours before he was assassinated. And this is the chat screenshot that Candace Owens has shown to the public. So Charlie Kirk says, just lost another huge Jewish donor, $2 million a year, because we won't cancel Tucker Carlson. I'm thinking of inviting Candace Owens. He's angry here or something like that. Jewish donors play into all the stereotypes. I cannot and will not be bullied like this, he says, leaving me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. And somebody is advising him and says, please don't invite Candace. That might feel good short term, but it is not good long term, in my opinion. Like all groups, you are going to get wide variety of opinions. That nasty free will think that God bestowed on us makes life frustrating at times. I don't know what's that literally means, but I think the person is advising Charlie not to invite Candace. Yes. So if these stakes are legit, it's huge, right? It's huge. And I think the discussion in the US has become too radicalized against Israel. The people are asking legitimate questions, which forced Netanyahu himself, the prime minister of Israel, to accelerate his media appearances, podcasts, everywhere. He's jumping from one place to another. It is his 6th visit, right? This year to the US. And they also have PSYOP agents, let's say, in American Congress, in the media. They're trying to PSYOP you, the American people. For example, unfortunately, Alex Jones has become one of them. He is sharing a video, an absurd video of Congresswoman who is on the AIPAC's payroll. She receives money from AIPAC. And he says, Congresswoman Ana Luna says, Charlie Kirk's assassination can be tied to foreign government funding. Here is why she thinks the Chinese are behind the killing of Charlie Kirk.
There's been a lot of questions as to whether there was foreign government involvement.
In which one?
In the assassination of Charlie Kirk, right?
Okay.
So, like, we're going to address these theories right now. Back during the ICE riots, do you remember all of that at the beginning of the year?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people were like, where are all of a sudden these big violent riots coming from? Who's funding these organizations? We found out that there was a foreign funding tied to an individual by the name of Neville Singham, who's a multi-billionaire. And he made his billions by working with the communist Chinese government. And he would take, and he's not a registered agent, a foreign agent, which is a FARA violation. So he's taking these millions, funneling it into organizations like the Party of Socialism and Liberation, who then in turn create these very radicalized movements, but they're not even American in theory or funded by American people. They're actually funded by foreign governments. The irony in all this is that Neville Singham, not just to Mamdani's election, so like Jews from Mamdani, but he actually also has ties to funding the Party of Socialism, the Salt Lake City queer group, which is now being investigated with former knowledge on whether or not they knew Charlie would be assassinated, who had ties to the shooter. So I do think that there's a foreign funding tie, but the question is which government, and I think it's tied to the Chinese.
Chinese.
Interesting.
Interesting.
I mean,
What was
like
it called? The queer what?
Salt Lake City queers.
Salt Lake City queers.
They're being investigated by the FBI. But if you look at the organization and where the funding comes from, I mean, not just them, they had ties to groups in Cuba and they are actually calling themselves terrorists. But not just that, they also have ties to the United Nations. So there's this aspect of a very pro-globalist and then a pro-Marxist movement to really sow discord and divide in this country. And that's why I recently posted on my social media, I was like, check out the bot farms that actually exist. And when you see all this shit talking on Twitter, make sure you're not arguing with the bot, because that's not like a fake thing. It happens. And so we have to realize that social media is being used to kind of stoke this divide. But in the instance of the shooter, Charlie Kirk was almost like a son to President Trump. Don Jr. will tell you was like his little brother.
Right.
Very close to J.D. Vance, very close to Kash Patel. So if you think for a second that there will be any amount of resource spared in his investigation, you're wrong. Because I know these people and I've seen the way that this administration has worked towards at least issuing some of the darkest secrets. For example, what happened with CIA and the connection to JFK's assassination. I've met with the director, but to, I think, really take into account that you have the family that is seeing all this stuff out there right now. I hope that they get every single person involved. I definitely think that it's likely that more than one person knew about what was happening, because the Salt Lake City queer group immediately deleted their page. They're under investigation. There's a foreign funding tie there. For Tyler Robinson to say that Charlie was, hateful and that he just wanted to eliminate his hatefulness, where does that come from, right? Like if you actually listen to the things that Charlie was saying and you don't clip it, you can realize it was a very logical conversation that he was trying to have. If you don't agree with it, it's still not a reason to murder someone.
I think you guys already responded enough to this video. I don't have to make further comments about this. So let's land this episode. Thank you so much, dear friend, for the generous support. I really appreciate it. What else to say? I think this was all for today. If you found value in today's analysis, please take a moment to like this video. Only 10% of you do it or does it. Thumbs up, guys. That's really helpful for me. Share this video with your friends. Subscribe to Syriana Analysis so you don't miss future streams. These small actions help us break through the censorship algorithms. And if you would like to go a step further, consider supporting Syriana Analysis on Patreon. Your contributions, whether big or small, allow me to remain independent. Keep producing in-depth geopolitical analysis and bring you perspectives you simply won't hear in mainstream media. You will find the Patreon link in the description below. You will find it also scrolling on the screen. And you can simply scan this barcode on the right or left side of the screen, and you could jump to the page of Syriana Analysis Patreon page. So thank you once again for tuning in, whether on YouTube, Rumble, or Ganjing World, and special thanks to our moderator, Red Access, and to all of you in the live chat for keeping the discussion sharp and engaging. Until next time, this is Kevork Almassian of Syriana Analysis. Stay informed, stay critical, and see you in the next stream. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.